Hi, we're back with WTF is Wake the Talk Up in our special section of 8 ways we can make communication our greatest asset. And today we're talking about the second way we can make communication our greatest asset, which is noticing how stories and the stories we create can make our communication more difficult.
Yeah.
And we're sort of differentiating stories from observations in a way that we think is very helpful to parse out what really happened versus what our filter is on an event or what our perception of an event was. And these are obviously very personal. So when we create stories, there can be this awareness that everyone has their own story around something that happened. And the observation we like to think of as the fish bone, that like in a cartoon fish bone, so we see the skeleton of a fish inside the fish, right? And if we pulled out just the skeleton and dangled it up and the fleshy bits are all over there, the skeleton is the observation. The skeleton is, what did the video or camera record in the room? What actually happened? What are the events that happened? What were the actual words that people said? How did they move? How did they turn their head? And the story is the fleshy part that's packed in around the skeleton. That's like the meaning or the interpretation or the filter that we put on it once we observe the events.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a way that we're kind of constantly creating stories and interpretations as humans about both big weighty things like what's the meaning of life and really innocuous stuff like why was the bus 2 minutes late. And what we're not saying is that stories are wrong and bad and that we are wrong and bad for creating stories. It's actually part of our superpower in a way as humans to create cause and effect connections and get curious about how to create future conditions. It's what makes us unique as individuals and as groups of people as well. What we are saying is if we lead with our interpretation or with our story in a communication, we're likely to decrease the possibility of understanding because everyone's story is different. So we're going to say, this is my story, and kind of get stuck, right? In that world, or that's a likely outcome. It's one that we've experienced a lot in our personal lives and our professional lives with our clients, with ourselves, and we continue to see it as we get deeper into this work.
And just to reiterate, this is how stories make our communication more difficult.
Yeah.
Because when we are entrenched or believing that our stories are true and the truth, then we're already setting ourselves up as I'm right and you're wrong. And therefore, I need to convince you of my truth because my truth is kind of lonely here by myself. And I want you to join me in it. I want us to have a shared experience in communication. Like we all want to be understood and to understand others. And so what we think we should be doing then is to convince other people of our truth and our stories.
And maybe we think if we convince other people of our truth, then we are good and worthy, right? And there's some value in that, depending on our family kind of structure, how we're internally organized. But that's a pretty common experience for many of us. Being on the side of truth is good. So we're trying to recruit others to be within our truth.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Allison, if now might be a nice time also to talk about how stories often have an aspect of shame and blame and how that can also create challenge in communication. Well, so often, right, when we're creating this interpretation of what happened, why it happened, how it happened, whether it's in a big overt way or in a minor way, we're placing blame and responsibility on either someone else, on ourselves, or some external event, on Trump, on the hurricane, on whatever. The bus was late and 5 minutes late, and it was because the bus driver wasn't paying attention or didn't care, or it's because the transit system is totally incompetent and disorganized, right? Or I was late for work because I missed the bus. I'm blaming myself, right? So when we are coming into a communication with this posture of blame, we're likely to be greeted with defensiveness, or maybe we're defending ourselves. Maybe we're putting someone else in a defensive position. Defensiveness and understanding aren't really very compatible. They're kind of like oil and water. We're either defending ourselves or we're open to other perspectives that might be different from our own, which is the bridge to understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happens with blame is that there's pain that's
Yeah.
created. Like I'm thinking that I'm bad or you're bad
Yeah.
or the world is bad. And versus kind of just saying like, this thing happened. It doesn't have to mean anything about me or you or the world. And now I also have these feelings and these needs, and I got to figure out how to try to get them met. And it just can land us in a place that is a little bit more gentle, a little bit more neutral, a little bit more spacious.
Yeah. Allison just alluded to feelings and needs. More on that in our next episodes. You'll have to come back next week for that one. I think that's a pretty deep dive into why stories can get us in trouble with communication. And just to say, last but not least, well, two things, I guess. One is we have many other episodes on stories from different angles and perspectives, because we find that it's just really rich and it never ceases to amaze us how much value there is in unpacking stories. And then second, if you like what you see here, we invite you to join our entry-level course, 88 founding members of Wake the Talk Up. It's literally $8, like the price of 2 fancy lattes for a limited time. And when you join that course, you get access to our private community forever, which has so many tools and resources. We can't even begin to get into it now. You'll have to come check it out.
Or maybe it's the price of 1 fancy latte with an extra shot in it.
Right.
Depending on where you are.
Depending on where you are in the world. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.